Hello and welcome to Yardables. This is Alana. Today we are going to be making some veggie turkey burgers. I like putting lots of veggies in a lot of the food that I make. It's a good way to get some extra vitamins and nutrients into your family. So we're going to be sneaking in some zucchini and some carrots and some other special ingredients into these burgers. I'm going to start out with a couple small zucchini, which we're going to cut up into quarters. Depending on your food processor, you can also probably cut them in half. It just depends on the size of the hole that you have in your processor. Mine isn't very large. I'm lucky that I have an attachment on my food processor. You can see it here. It's a shredding attachment, so I can easily shred vegetables in my food processor. So we're going to use that attachment to shred up some zucchini. So now that the zucchini is shredded, I'm also going to shred some carrots. So I'm just going to put the attachment back on the processor, and I just had some baby carrots on hand. You can use whole carrots, baby carrots, whatever you have on hand. And you're going to shred those up, probably about a cup of carrots. Now for some of the fun ingredients. I am big on dehydrating, so I happen to have some dehydrated mushrooms on hand. My family is not a huge fan of mushrooms, especially my kids, so I like hiding things in our food. So I'm going to take some of my dehydrated mushrooms, and we are going to use a NutriBullet, and we're going to powder these. Alright, so now we have our shredded carrots, our shredded zucchini prepared, and my powdered mushrooms. If you don't like powdered mushrooms or you don't have access to them, you can leave those out of the recipe. I'm going to start out with 2 pounds of ground turkey. You can also half this recipe and use 1 pound of ground turkey, and then just divide all the other ingredients in half. I'm not super good at measuring my ingredients, so most of this recipe is sort of an estimate of what I use. So I'm going to start out with half a cup of shredded carrots. I know earlier I said a cup, but I think right now I'm just going to start with half a cup because that's what I shredded. I'm going to start with about a cup of the shredded zucchini and add that into the ground turkey. Like I said, it's all rough measurements. If you want more veggies in it, add more or less. Alright, next up I'm going to be adding some of the powdered mushroom that we made. I'm going to add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of powdered mushroom into our mix. If you don't have powdered mushroom, you can leave it out. Next up, I'm going to add some basil. I'm going to put in about half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of dried basil. If you are curious on how to make your own dried basil, check out some of our other videos. I have a video on how to dehydrate your own basil. Next up, we're going to add some sage. I was almost out of sage. I used about 1.5 teaspoons of sage in my mix, or a teaspoon per pound. It's up to you. It depends what herbs you like and how seasoned you would like your mix. I also like to dehydrate all kinds of superfood greens from the garden, so we're going to add about half a teaspoon of kale to the mix, and then we're going to also add about half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon of dried oregano. I'm lucky enough to live in the Southwest where we can actually grow our own moringa trees, so I actually dry and powder my own moringa. We'll have a video coming up on that soon. So I'm also going to be adding half a teaspoon of moringa powder to the mix. The last ingredient that I like to use is dried tomato powder. That is also super easy to make if you have a dehydrator, and you can dry your own tomatoes. You just powder it just like the mushrooms. So I'm going to add about a teaspoon of the tomato powder to the turkey burger mix. So this is where most people will add breadcrumbs to their burger mixes. We do gluten-free. We have a family member who can't have gluten. So I actually have some dehydrated sweet potatoes, and these actually work really well in the burgers as a binding agent. And it's also adds some extra health benefits for the family. Then we're also going to add in 2 eggs. I use about 1 egg per pound of ground meat. So this is probably the part I like the least of making the burgers. You have to get all messy. It's more when the meat's cold. So we're going to mix all the ingredients together. Make sure everything's incorporated really well, especially the shredded veggies. If you get big clumps in it, then your burgers won't stick together too well. Alright, so now we're ready to prepare our burgers. I'm going to start out with a cookie sheet, and I like to use some wax paper for the ones that I'm going to freeze. For this mix here, I'm going to cook half tonight, and then the other half I'm going to make patties, and I'm going to pre-freeze them on a cookie sheet so they don't stick together, and then we will package them up for the freezer. So I'm going to start by taking about a handful of the turkey mix, and we're going to make 4 patties for the freezer. Okay, so I'm going to throw those ones into the freezer for a couple hours just until they are frozen solid, or mostly solid. Then we're going to remove them from the freezer, and we're going to package them up into a freezer-safe bag for future use. Since I already have wax paper on the tray, I'm just going to reuse that, so I'm going to fold it over and put it in between the burgers so that they don't stick together when they're in the freezer, and then I'm going to package them up, just put them in a Ziploc bag and remove all the air from the bag, and then we'll date and label it and put them in the freezer until we are ready for them. So this is kind of a 2-for-1 type meal. You can make double the batch, have one in the freezer for a future date, and you can also make some for dinner that night. So we are going to heat up a cast iron pan. I like using cast iron pans over non-stick pans. They have less chemicals in them. I like the way that they cook food. So we're going to put some olive oil in a pan. We're going to heat it up to medium-low and throw the burgers on. We're going to let them cook for about 5 to 8 minutes per side, and then we'll flip them over and cook on the other side. Make sure your burgers are fully cooked before you eat them. So these are just about done and we're ready to enjoy. Hope you like this recipe. Leave any comments below. Also make sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more great recipes.